Good morning, everyone. The enduring struggle for voting rights in America has been a central issue in the fight for an equal and democratic society for the past 200 years. Through various periods of history, minority groups have faced significant obstacles to expressing their right to vote. This ongoing battle has inspired many, along with ourselves, to create this compelling documentary capturing the essence and importance of this fight. In early America, only land owning Christian white men could vote. The first steps towards change happened during the late 19th century. State legislatures began to expand the range of people who could vote by limiting the property requirements. Then, after the Civil War, during the period of Reconstruction, um, the 15th Amendment was passed by Congress, which gave Americans the right to vote no matter what race they were. This was ratified by Congress in 1870. Although in the South, things like poll taxes and literacy tests were implemented to subvert this amendment. These issues came to a head in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. Things like poll taxes and literacy tests were deliberately designed to stop black people from voting. In March of 1965, in Selma, Alabama, MLK protested this issue and was attacked by police. This is known as Bloody Sunday. The poll tax was designed to keep poor people, who were mainly black, from voting. The 24th Amendment targeted this and was approved by Congress in 1962. The poll taxes were ruled unconstitutional in 1966 by the Supreme Court. Civil rights is an ongoing issue, but black people can vote, and Jim Crow laws are no longer a direct threat.
The fight for women's rights and suffrage has been a cornerstone of the struggle for equality, aiming to challenge societal norms and secure equal opportunities for women. At its heart, it was the demand for the right to vote, a key to political and social empowerment. The movement began to take shape at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, where pioneers like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott boldly declared that women deserve the same rights as men. The Seneca Falls Convention, held on July 19th through 20th, 1848, in Seneca Falls, New York, was a groundbreaking event that marked the official beginning of the organized women's rights movement in the United States. Started by activists Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott and other reformers, the convention was the first of its kind planned by women to address social, political, and economic inequalities they faced. The event resulted in the Declaration of Sentiments, a bold document modeled after the Declaration of Independence, which demanded equal rights for women, including the right to vote. Although controversial at the time, this call for suffrage became the turning point of the women's rights movement. The Seneca Falls Convention inspired decades of activism, ultimately leading to the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote and cementing its legacy as the pivotal moment of the fight for women's equality. After the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the women's suffrage movement gained momentum as activists across the United States began organizing to demand voting rights and equality. Leaders such as Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton worked tirelessly to establish women's suffrage organizations, including the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. These groups held conventions, wrote petitions, and campaigned to raise awareness of women's disenfranchisement, often facing fierce opposition from both political leaders and the public. Their efforts were vital in keeping the issue alive on the national stage despite decades of resistance. In the early 20th century, the movement gained new momentum through more aggressive tactics led by women like Alice Paul and the National Women Party. These group members organized parades, picketed the White House, and endured arrests and hunger strikes to draw attention to their cause. Finally, after a year of activism and sacrifice, the movement achieved a monumental victory with the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, guaranteeing women the right to vote. This achievement marked a turning point in American democracy, empowering women to participate fully in the political process and paving the way for further advancements in women's rights.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a historical piece of legislation born out of decades of struggle. In the 1960s, black Americans faced challenging barriers to voting, including discriminatory practices like literacy tests, poll taxes, and pure intimidation. Activists like Martin Luther King Jr. and countless others risked their lives to demand justice for equality. The Selma marches, for example, especially the brutal events of Bloody Sunday, exposed the violence and inequality to the world, pushing Congress and President at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, to act. In August 1965, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law, prohibiting racial discrimination in voting and ensuring that democracy could be accessible to all. However, the fight for voting rights did not end there. Over the decades, new challenges have emerged. In 2013, the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County v. Holder struck down a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, allowing states with histories of discrimination to change voting laws without federal oversight. This led to the rapid implementation of voter ID laws, polling place closures, and other measures that disproportionately impact marginalized communities. Despite these setbacks, activists today continue their work of the civil rights movement, advocating for legislation to restore and expand protection for all voters. The principle that voting should be available to everyone is fundamental to a successful democracy. Yet millions of Americans still face barriers due to systematic inequities, language barriers, or lack of access to polling places. Ensuring fair and equal access to the ballot box is not just about protecting a right, it's about safeguarding the future of our democracy. From 1965 to today, the fight for voting rights remains a fight for equality, justice, and the power of the people. The legacy of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 continues to evolve, reminding us that democracy requires constant watching. In recent years, new movements such as grassroots movements have emerged, led by organizations like Fair Fight Action and activists such as Stacey Abrams, who have worked tirelessly to fight voter suppression and expand voter access. These efforts include registering millions of new voters, pushing for fair districting, and challenging restrictive voting laws in court. Meanwhile, the rise of technology has introduced both opportunities and challenges. For example, online voter registration and digital outreach have made both participation more accessible for some, while misinformation campaigns and cybersecurity threats pose new risks to election integrity. As we look to the future, the lessons of 1965 remind us that the fight for voting rights is ongoing and still is important today. A collective responsibility to ensure that every voice is heard and every vote counts.
The struggle for voting rights in the United States highlights a long and treacherous journey toward equality and justice. Black men gained the constitutional right to vote with the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870 through systematic barriers such as literary tests, poll taxes, and intimidation suppressed their participation. Women secured the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in 1920, marking a pivotal victory for gender equality. Despite these legal advancements, many marginalized groups, particularly Black Americans, continued to face voter suppression until the Voting Acts of 1965. This landmark legislation dismantled discriminatory practices and aimed to ensure equal access to the ballot box, reinforcing democratic principles that every citizen's voice matters.